All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wireheads. I am Emmerron, and this is my co-host, Diamond Dust. She and I are here for the 11th week. I'm here 11 weeks straight. She's only missed one of them. Had to be substitute for Nyla on a week where she'd been very overworked. So we're still doing this. I don't know how we've managed this every single week. It just occurred to me, I don't have any music playing, so bear with me, everyone, while I get that up.
Oh, my bad.
No, you're good. It's not your fault, because I could just as easily pull up Carl Casey, and I do have the playlist on standby for that. There we go. Beautiful. That should be about right. Awesome. But hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. So this week, it's an odd episode. So that means I get my lovely subject first here. Before we dive too deep into this, I do want to remind all of you, this Friday, Diamond and I are having an interview with Jay Gray. It is going to be about the Cyberpunk Edgerunners mission kit. If you're hearing this on Spotify, I'm so sorry for you. It is already too late. We've already done it. If you're watching this on YouTube, same thing. It's too late. We've already done it because we usually put these out on the recordings on Friday nights. However, with that in mind, I'm going to turn this music down just a little more. There we go. That's better. With that in mind, if you are here with us live tonight on Twitch, please, in either of our chats, if you want to submit questions, you can do so. If you would rather not put it out in chat and you would rather send it to us either personally via a DM on Discord or via our email, wireheadspod@googlegroups.com. We are accepting all of those questions still. If you have a question about the CEMK and you would like Jay Gray to answer it, if we can ask him it, because there's obviously going to be some boundaries to what we can and cannot ask, we will try to ask him or ask the spirit of it if we think of a better way to maybe get a couple questions melded into a single one. We will ask that at the very least in spirit, so hopefully you get the answer you're looking for.
Don't ask for a goddamn release date.
Do not.
Don't ask for it. It's not happening.
Do not. We swear to God. We want to know as much as all of you. If we knew it beyond what we already know, we would say it, but we cannot. We have no information there. There is nothing, and Rob Barefoot is being extremely strict on there being no leaks, none. No information goes out, nothing hits our ears. The second it does, we tell you all. Just about all the time. If there's an announcement we can make, we make it on our Discord servers pretty much the same day. We talked about it here on Wireheads. The very next opportunity we would get, trust us, we'd move everything off the schedule until that was addressed. Like, if the second we know, we are going to bring that to your ears. However, that little preamble aside, again, Jay Gray, questions, Twitch, you know what to do. Put it in our chats, in our DMs, in our email. We will happily ask that question if it's one that we can ask him in good faith and expect a response, because he is also, remember, a bit of a troll. He will give non-answers if we don't ask it a particular way. So that said, let us go into the subject. So subject one tonight, it's going to look a little odd maybe to you on Twitch. It's what themes call to you. But I know that's a kind of a weird way to say it. However, the subject matter that I want to discuss tonight, Diamond and I are both GMs. We both actively write our own gigs. Week to week, we lean into very occasionally something off of RTG's library, whether that's Tales of the Red, or like earlier tonight, we just wrapped up the incident from Danger Gal Dossier over in her game. So that being the case, when we look at gigs, whether they be pre-written ones that RTG has put out, or we're writing our own, I want to have a little discussion about theme and like why we like the things we do, what we like to write about, and then like dive down a little bit into how we maybe write for particular themes, and if we want to get something specific out of a out of a sort of adventure or something that we're writing, how we navigate that. So Diamond, I guess I'll start by asking you before I talk any more here, considering we're already, a bit of a distance into this. When you start writing, what are usually like the themes you're most, I guess, comfortable with writing or prefer to write as opposed to others?
So, chat, I think you've witnessed this a few times, but there's three major topics for me, and that is the human condition that I've been learning a little bit more and more about, AI and how aware are they, and finally transhumanism. And the existential crisis that those cause. And I guess also in general, just like how to live in a world that hates you as well. Like very much more like self versus self, or self versus what they believe to versus beliefs. That's kind of the conflicts that I look for. Because, of course, vending machines can't talk. They don't have feelings.
Remember, kids, vending machines aren't people, however much they might convince you they are.
And, just like, actually, Gaster and I talked about this. The ship of Theseus.
Oh, ship of Theseus, yeah.
Yeah, ship of Theseus. When Gaster and I have talked about this before, and of course it does wander along the lines of cyberpsychosis, which mental illness is a theme that I will touch on lightly because of a world like this where you as a person don't have the same nurturing environment that we do. And well, I wouldn't even say that for us, but before the fall.
I mean, it's not outlandish to say, like, we both have circles that care about us, that would care about our well-being, and that becomes strikingly rare in a world like Cyberpunk's, I think. And it's also, I think, like, talking about mental illness in both in the context of that specifically, as well as just the broader societal implications of like what the Time of the Red and Cyberpunk, even across its whole timeline. Like, we could talk anywhere from 2020 to 2077 and everything in between, and it features prominently because the society is so jacked up and like it's so tilted up against the players and edge runners in general, and the common man is but a cog in the machine. The real masters are the corporations, the authority figures, all of that. So I don't think you get away from talking about mental illness in that type of a society.
Now, the ship of Theseus, like Gaster and I talked about, especially is very big, especially amongst the solos that I have show up at my table, where they keep, they start off with themselves, maybe a little bit of cyber, but then what's one more piece? Oh, what's one more piece? What's one more piece?
I believe
one more piece.
I believe tonight I asked, oh, that's not a problem, when Sasha's wait, 8-bit, you're at 1 empathy? I'm like, yeah, what's the problem?
And then you hit that point where people don't recognize you for who you once were, unless they really know who you are. You start losing your own recognition, and then the question comes up, are you still yourself? Is it you this whole time? Was the journey worth it?
Just pack on as many emotionally triggering statements into one sentence as you can, why don't you? I think that the ship of Theseus feels less applicable for the most part. I think that we come across that problem more when you really hit the extreme end and you go like full Borg. that hits Ship of Theseus really hard. I think piecing together your body into chrome and things like that, I feel as though that it definitely like has echoes of that for sure. I think it's more the discussion. I think like the way the book talks about it, right? For cyberpsychosis in particular, is the more you view your parts as interchangeable, the more you view other people and their parts as also interchangeable, and you objectify them far more to the point of lacking empathy for them. And if they're just a bunch of parts that can be interchanged, what's the problem if you remove the parts that could harm you, right? Without recognizing the pain or the trauma or any of those, problematic issues when you're harming another person, right? And their whole isn't respected anymore. It's entirely their parts are the only thing you think about, and those are just emotionless. You're just like, I just took off their arm, whatever. That's just a machine. I took off their leg, whatever. That's just a machine. Meanwhile, they're howling in pain.
I suppose like when we look at the existentialism is one of those also. I don't know if you touch on that one as much, Emmerron.
I do. I would say like the themes I like to toy around with the most are existentialism is like a really, really big one that I actually really enjoy toying with. And I think a lot of those other things you talked about kind of tie back into that in one way or another. Because in existentialism, you have to touch on the human condition. You have to touch on, mental health as like a topic and the decline of it. You also have to contend a lot with the casual cruelty of society and the casual disregard society has for like you as an individual versus the collective that you kind of are part of. I feel like, and this is why, to go on a very small tangent that I think is important, there's been a lot of asking this last week in the Artel Discord about, do we think, and we might give a longer answer to this collectively in the QA section, because this wasn't directed at us per se, but I have a lot of thoughts about it. Do you think that once we have rules for playing the game in 2077 as an era, 2045 will go by the wayside, no one will want to play it anymore? And no. I would, exactly, my quick response to it is no. And I think that a big reason of that is because the themes I like to write about are all at their best point in the timeline in the time of the Red, or shortly before or thereafter, because you are dealing with the most level playing field that society has had in the cyberpunk timeline for probably a good couple decades, if not more. Corporations are at their all-time low in terms of power. Individualism is at an all-time high in terms of its, hold on power within society. Nomads are a collective. They're not any one corporation like, Militech or Arasaka or even the transport corporations like DTR we see in 77. Those don't exist yet. Or if they do, they're in their prototype stage like Meta, right? And they're not really as powerful in the time of the Red. You're relying on these ramshackle collectives that are very like almost communist in nature, right? To an anarchist, to like get society back into a place that it can self-sustain and self-correct again.
I guess like another thing that we look at is, the societal like strains of two different sides of the line where, for example, perfect example, NCPD and the zoners.
Yeah.
You see the zoners who just simply want to live, who want South Night City to be brought into the fold with the rest of the city. Mm-hmm. But then you have, the corporations and NCPD pushing back against him.
Yeah.
And then, you get brain dances like Mr. Stud killing Zarafa goons.
Yeah. Yeah, like I enjoy like the sort of cyberpunk that like dark synthwave evokes. A lot of the shady alleys with steam, with neon, you know, like the sort of grungy feel you get out of Blade Runner without the inquisitive kind of like detective noir you would get from a series like that. It's more the, you know, the violent oppression out of something more like, you know, Akira or The Matrix or something like that, you know, where there's a violently oppressive force and you're trying to fight back against it. Those are, I think, some of my favorite cyberpunk stories are like the very, like someone once said, I forget who it was specifically, but someone said in my chat when I was running Neon Inferno one week, when someone asked like, oh, like what kind of cyberpunk game is this? And someone made the comment like, Emmerron's really good at like deeply punk cyberpunk stories. And I'd like to think that that's pretty accurate for the way I look at the game and the way I like to write the game. I like writing those stories that have a lot of individuals fighting back against the system and trying to get one up on their oppressors. Those are my favorite kinds of stories, is the oppressed beating the oppressor.
Or dying trying.
Right. Because I think both of those stories have a lot to say. And they're inherently, I think, some of the most interesting within the cyberpunk setting. And they also are the ones I feel like more often than not. And this is where I know that this style of writing isn't going to be for everybody, obviously, because it's also the stuff we hear about so often in our real lives. And it's the stuff that I feel like we feel the most powerless about in our day-to-day real lives. So it is really, I feel like it's a really important thing that we talk about some of those things, even if they're really uncomfortable or they're very infuriating, you know, on some level, because we're so powerless. I think that cyberpunk is in a lot of ways the outlet through which I express my frustrations. And I hope that by giving voice to people, the players at my table in this case, to do the same thing through the medium I create, it is therapeutic for everybody because we get to vent a little of that in a way that isn't just screaming at the cloud, right? It's us being able to express them broadly in an environment where that is kind of the expected outcome, that you do actually take action and you actually do something about it, right? But yeah, that's kind of where I like to write. Those are kind of my favorite themes, are things around existentialism and like fighting back against a social order that doesn't accept you and doesn't want to make room for you. That is the thing that I think I enjoy telling those stories about the most.
Emmerron, do you have my chat up by chance?
You know, let me double check. I thought I had them up. Let me see. Do I have them up on another tab?
So, well, while you're doing that, for me, I very much more like to look at the individuals and how they specifically are facing challenges in the time of the Red. And like you like, let alone like seeing where there should be plenty of, you know, how, well, in a time when people need it the most, housing becomes, you know, still the hottest commodity in the fucking world. You know, 1,000 eddies to live in a, you know, repurposed cargo container. And, well, also on top of that, gosh, just to be able to score a decent meal, you're having to scrape up $300 a month in order to even just have a decent lifestyle in the process. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be told about the stress that it puts on people. And what it's like when you are trying to fight against, you know, not only the oppressing forces, but also just the environment around you. I suppose something that I like, especially with, gosh, one of the other things I like with Cyberpunk is also just having that ability also to handle things in a way that, sure, your character will face consequences, but you may feel a little bit better after doing it. Like, for me, I suppose we're going to go on a tangent here. By the way, Phantom Liberty spoiler. When V has to go break into the sports academy down here in Dogtown.
I've not played through that quest, I don't think, but I'm okay with being spoiled on it. That's okay.
Long story short, being able to break down systems that pick out individuals like that, especially the vulnerable, feels good to stomp the shit out of out of them.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think that, and that's kind of the big things that I try to chase is like, you're being oppressed. What do? You fight back against your oppressor, and when you can do that by like launching them out a 20-second story window or something like that, there's just something so immensely satisfying about it, because they're not things you would ever do in real life. That's never really tenable or good to do IRL, right? None of those things are anything that I'd ever want to do.
Or legal. But if you push someone hard enough, they might do it.
Right. And so I think that in a lot of ways, the way I look at Cyberpunk is this, right? It's a way to kind of like vent some of those frustrations, or on the other side of it, act the moral high ground out in a society like that and see where it gets you. Because on one hand, you could have been this person that was trying to always do the right thing and like remain high empathy and like fight back against something, and then be taken out by it and have everyone else around you recognize how messed up that was, and you're still there as the player to kind of like understand like how others saw you when you were doing that, right? And it goes to a place where then you can be like, I think one of the strongest and most powerful things I've seen in the game, right? And this is something that, this is why I'm not afraid to push my players to the absolute edge, is when a player character dies, the player gets to be a fly on the wall at their own funeral, and they can see and hear what the other people thought of them, right? Or the caricature, at least, that they played while they were that character. So I think there's something immensely important about that, where like you can hear all the best things people thought about you, but like while you're still alive, and I think that is that's an immensely powerful thought experiment, if nothing else. And it leads to some really interesting storytelling that you don't get off of pure power fantasies.
Now, one of the other topics I like to dig into has to do with what about AIs? There is something about the idea of AIs being just maybe not full-on sentient, but just sentient enough to where they can garner some understanding of themselves and then start developing off of it. And then I mean, just the thought of pushing an AI to the point that they're on the border of realizing exactly what they are.
Yeah,
I don't know. It kind of entices me a little bit. Just like, what happens if you do that?
Well, and
what happens if you push someone to that point, or push something to that point that you don't understand how it feels?
Have you read the personality constructs that exist in 2020 for AI, like in the Netrunning chapter?
I have not.
Because they're really interesting, just from the standpoint of like, once an AI has, I think it's like 4 CPUs in it, So that makes it into an AI at that point. It has 12 intelligence, which, for those of you who are read exclusively and don't know 2020 at all, 2020's stat caps were 10 instead of 8. So 12 sounds like a whole lot more in red terms than it was in 2020. It's still above the human cap though. And you can have up to 7 CPU cores in a system. So an AI can be more than twice as intelligent as the smartest human, which is pretty wild. When you pair that up with the descriptions they give for their personalities and things like that, they have some systems that are like, they are human, where they try to behave as humanly as possible. They try to be relatable. They try to be, you know, like matching the kind of empathy and all of that a human would have for its own species. And on the flip side of that, you've got some humans, or some AIs rather, that are, they try to portray like biblically accurate angel or something of that nature, where they like are fascinated with humans and their mythology. And others are just geometric shapes, and they totally eschew human standard or whatever. They take whatever form they think is most efficient for whatever their purpose is. So it's really interesting. I highly recommend reading those if you want to play with that theme, because it is extremely interesting to see kind of how those could all kind of come out depicted. And they have like almost like a mini life path for making an AI character in a setting through that chapter.
Japers.
Yeah. I know, because I just read through it all for this week's Neon Inferno, so.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I suppose, you know, like looking at that though, like when we see, I suppose, you know, some people are aware of a certain monstrosity I've made known as Oddity. So we have someone known as Oddity. Oddity is as close to a replicant as we're going to get in the cyberpunk universe, where somebody thought, hey, we can clone limbs. Why don't we clone bodies? And see what happens if we take a, you know, a developing AI and connect it to a almost functional human brain.
Nothing could go wrong here at all. I don't see any problems.
Nothing has gone wrong yet.
Yet.
Don't worry. I guess, you know, then again, they haven't seen the horrors of the world yet. Once that happens.
Yeah, then everyone's really fucked at the end of the day. That's yikes. That is a big ol' yikes. Oof. I'm just trying to deal with Mike here real quick. Bear with me.
Oh.
There we go.
I think Raven's comment. What, Raven's comment throw you off or something?
No, here's the thing. His comment is not the first comment I've gotten about that. The other came from my wife, and I'm like, oh, Jesus, come on. Get your minds out of the gutter. So I'm doing my best to counteract that. Because the truth of it is, his hips are here. Like, I'm sorry. This thing in the middle here, this is a sword. He's got a sword pointed at the ground. Like... If that sword weren't there, it would not be nearly as confusing.
I suppose one of the other things that I've kind of thought about when it comes to cyberpunk is like how does one continue to retain being an individual in such a place where, you know, being an individual is going to take you doing some very extreme things to be a notable individual.
Yeah, I mean, the way I typically write for that, or, you know, try to write a campaign to do that or give power in that way, is to make those individuals eventually be like a large part of a community, right? Like with season 1, it was, you know, they were runners for the Inferno Club and later for Rex and Club Synapse, and they became steadily more important to him, to Royal, to the Sand Vipers, because they worked with them several times throughout the season. And season 2, I kind of dialed that up even harder by like making them, they're all residents of the old combat zone, at least till about halfway through this season, because I view us as about 2/3 of the way through the season now, where we currently stand. And only just recently did they really expand beyond the old combat zone and the role that they had there as like protectors of it, as residents of it, and they've slowly gained reputation within the community there, obviously. And so if you become a singularly important person within a broader community, it allows you to be that individual, right? Like individualism comes from being notable and by extension kind of powerful in one way, or you know, one interpretation you could say of being powerful, what that looks like.
Oh gosh. And then I suppose one of the other topics, and I don't know if you've touched on this as much, but like I know we, you know, there's the mechanical portions of it, but humanity.
I do fuck with humanity quite a bit, honestly.
Like when do we define what causes the humanity loss? What, like when telling this story, when we look at our players and really decide, you know, that person might just be a little too empathetic for this to not bother them. When do we like try to figure out when or what we do to decide when that happens?
So the way I usually break it down, because this is kind of how my GM in real life breaks it down when we've had games at his table. If the players or if the character, you know, that someone's playing is like a med tech, obviously, right? Med techs, you do surgery. Like if you're a surgical med tech, that is, right? At the bare minimum, though, you'd probably still, even if you're non-surgical, you'd still be exposed to things like gore. You'd be exposed to some really messed up scenes. And you would become somewhat hardened to them, obviously. Like, it wouldn't traumatize you the same way it would to somebody like maybe a rocker boy or a media who doesn't really go out on the streets and participate in that kind of wanton violence, you know? So there are times where I would be able to hold on to my sanity just fine, or my humanity in this case just fine, because I'd just be chopping up a body or something for parts. Like, does that sound fucked up? Absolutely, it sounds fucked up. Is it something that I as a med tech would do pretty often, especially if I'm working in like less wealthy parts of the city? Also, yes. So for me, I got over that a long time ago where that would affect me. Whereas like our media, who was by all, you know, accounts from a far better positioned background, the first time he's like, oh yeah, let me record you taking that apart just so I can add it as B-roll or whatever. And then he sees me dispose of whatever's left. Our GM had him roll humanity loss. He's like, you're not used to this. Like, this is, by all accounts, extremely brutal. It is not something you're accustomed to. So I think thing number one is, would your character, by their life path and their role, already be exposed enough or desensitized enough to whatever they're doing that it would constitute further loss of their sense of empathy and humanity? If no, don't roll. If yes, roll. The other thing is, did whatever just happened, like whatever event just occurred, like this happened in the last session we played, our media lost his mother in the middle of the gig because she was taken as hostage, and then he literally watched as the last part of the adversary we were against, their torture killed her. he lost humanity, obviously, because like that's his mother, and that was part of the reason we were so insistent on getting this done, right? And it just led to, we weren't fast enough. We couldn't save her, and as he's moving in and out of consciousness, because he was on death's door too, I barely saved him. He heard her last words, and like, yeah, that's a humanity loss. So I think a lot of it comes down to judgment calls like that, but I think that there's certainly justification to be made for, like, if you're a solo or a medsec or even like a lawman, you're probably going to be more desensitized to violent, gruesome acts than the average booster ganger would be, or like the average, I should say, like person, the average civilian of Night City would be, unless they lived in like a combat zone or some other deeply impoverished or violent area. But yeah, that's usually the way I kind of handle it. What about you?
So I suppose for me, of course, alongside all those lines, depending on their background, it will really kind of cause the humanity loss to happen. And I suppose also other things for me. Let's say you're a fresh-faced edge runner. Like, like, how are you solo rank 4 and, a fresh-faced edge runner? Maybe it's just all been training and training and training up to this point. You've never really actually gotten an actual lick of combat. It's only been simulation after simulation after simulation. Maybe that's what you did in the PD, and you don't really know what it's like out there. First time you kill someone, it really does change you. It really creates a very sudden shell shock to someone. And, I'd imagine for a solo, sure, you may have shot targets, but, first time you put down someone that tries to attack the person you're escorting, it might fuck you up in a weird way.
That's fair.
Betrayals, very close betrayals. Someone that you guys trusted, maybe, a long time confidant, or maybe a fixer that has just decided that they've had enough of you and they need to get rid of you. Suddenly, that loss in, that ability to trust anyone, that causes humanity loss.
So I know one thing that, like, because when you describe that, like the betrayal of like a confidant or someone you've worked closely with for a long time, and then that sudden betrayal hits, typically what my GM would have us do, and I really liked this idea because I think that it's a it kind of represents how together are you at the end of it. He would either have us roll some kind of check, like concentration, or he would have us roll a d10 and aim to roll under our empathy. And that way, like, the more gone you are when you have to make that roll, the more likely it is to have a deep and immediate impact on your sense of humanity and empathy. Like, if you have a higher empathy, you have a better way of kind of coping with it, is kind of the way to extrapolate that, right? Like, you can cope better with the betrayal and have a more like logical and ordered sort of reaction and response to it than if you are already half losing it. You're already borderline cyberpsychosis, like at 2 or 1 empathy, and then you have to roll, a 1 or a 1 or a 2, and you're like, okay, well, like, if I don't roll that 1 or a 2, I'm losing some humanity here from that, as my character has a violent reaction and response to it and just really wants to zero whatever guy just did this to me, put me in this position, whatever have you.
Also, sometimes when characters for the first time do something that's like really out of line, and it's not so much like trying to punish the players, but when a character does something that's like real out of line for them, like this is something that they don't normally do, that can also cause humanity loss, where you're not normally a scab. You don't pick off the bodies, but suddenly a tech just decided, hey, it's time to start hacking.
Right.
Time to make some money. And this is the first time they've done something like that, and this is really unusual for their background.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
it's like taking a dip into a drug, and then suddenly, oh, hey, I do this, it makes me money.
It's like, oh yeah, I like how that makes me feel, or what that gets me at the end of the day. And then yeah, you watch the slow tilt into psychosis over time. That's because the true thing there is, like, unless you started incredibly low empathy, you are probably going to be okay, for one or two instances of something like that. But like, the lower you push it with things like cyberware, and the harder it pushes against you from things like your environment sucking and things like that, which is, I think, like a whole different thing that we don't really talk about in the Time of the Red. And I know you and I have talked about this, I think on the podcast, but definitely, privately we've talked about this before, where like living conditions in Red just don't feel like they have the right level of impact for your sanity. And it feels like there should be more there for, like, if you're living in a cube hotel constantly, or you're living in a cargo container constantly, like if you're living in like a Conapt, like a studio Conapt or something like V does in 77, that's living okay, because then you've got a bathroom, you've got a bedroom, you've got a space where you can eat and watch TV, and all of those things belong to you, right? On some level. Like, you maybe still need to go out to a laundromat or something, but like most everything else is handled in-house, and you can still potentially get a hold of things to like eliminate the need to go out for laundry, which is like you get a Jeeves garment bag, for example, and have it repair and clean your gear for you that way. And by doing that, like, that improves your living conditions considerably. And that should immediately, like, obviously, like, living in a house like what I have is like far preferable to living in some of like the 1-bedroom or studio apartments I've seen like some of my friends have to live in for extended periods of time. And I'm like, yeah, that has a definite help on mental health and things like that, because you're not crammed into this tiny box or something. You're able to live in something that resembles an actual living space.
Well, I could see at the Time of the Red maybe cargo containers, because of how widely accepted that is a primary choice of housing that most people need to just go with. I mean, I could see it taking a toll after a good long while.
Sure.
Cube hotels, maybe after a couple months could really do some punishment. And also, same with the kibble lifestyle.
Yeah. I mean, eating shitty food all the time is not a way to live.
And
like,
nickeled and dimed for everything.
Yep. I mean, and having, by extension, most of the time having so little money, or being able to afford so little, that like you have to constantly be checking your wallet, right? Because like, yep. I think there's a level, even, and this applies to real life too, there's a level when you have a certain level of income where like you don't always check your bank balance before making like a little purchase, right? Like if I go out to the store and I say, oh man, yeah, I want to buy, like, what's a good example? Like, I want to buy that pack of donuts, right? And they're not something I need, they're something I want in the moment, and they're like, they're the nicer donuts. They're like the ones like that the store made that day or something. And you're like, okay, cool. Pack of like a dozen fresh donuts. Well, that's going to run you like $7-8. And there's a level of wealth where that $7-8 no longer calculates. You're like, yeah, fine, whatever. And then there's the level of wealth where you're like, wait a minute, I need to really consider that against my budget. And like,
yeah,
if I was always in the position for months and months and months on end, because I've had months like that, like singular months, and it's like, okay, yeah, this month, because we had this giant expense or something the month prior, I need to like lock in and be mindful of what am I spending right now. On the other end, on the months where I don't need to worry about it, it's much better, because you're like, okay, well, like, we have a little extra money or whatever. Like maybe it was just my birthday, or maybe it was a holiday, or just got a bonus at work or something. There's all kinds of reasons that you have a little extra income to burn on a given month or whatever. But those months are good months. They're the ones that you're like, yes, we actually have some money to spend this month and can do something nice for myself. And that matters. And I'm surprised they don't include that, I think, in like the humanity rules of Red. As of now, at least, we don't see anything like that.
I suppose on top of that, like, there's the like cargo container and, apartments and cargo containers share the same type of upgrades, and then, the con apps have a variance of upgrades that, like, honestly, I'm surprised that, those upgrades that they have in those DLCs really don't impact, like how you're feeling about your place.
Yeah, because I'm like, I think you could make a cargo container into a nice livable space, but like, not it's never going to be like the same as being in like a studio apartment, right? But it's going to be, you could compete with it given enough time and the right amenities.
I mean, like $500 to bring your cargo container to be like one of the nicest homes for probably blocks.
I mean, without you have to always obviously think about like, how much of a target am I making myself when you do that too. Mm-hmm. That's the hard part, is like, so I guess here's the thing, as we talk about that and lifestyle and that being a theme in the game, how often do you go after your players using their life path as justification, or their lifestyle rather, as justification for going after them? That's why I wanted to ask.
Oh, it's all fun. It's all fun and games till somebody I'm gonna immediately point to it. Little Miss wanted to purchase food for the entire crew. It's like, all right, let's see what kind of budget you got. It's gonna be kind of cutting it close on how much proportion there. I mean, I had one player where they wanted to hire out. They wanted to hire out a very, very high level solo. Hire backhand from the Forlorn Hope. All right. Because I imagine most of the edge runners are of somewhere of that mix. And, in the case of backhand, I have her alongside Team Monster and a few others in that mix. And she looked at them and is like, all right, well, I want $500 plus I want a 20% cut of that gig. Now, if someone had the fresh food lifestyle, I could allow them to make such a purchase once. They would just give up their hotel for the month.
Right.
They all just looked at her like she was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you're making some demands. So when it comes to more the aspect of it where you're hunted for like being the nicest house on the block, how often do you do things like that where you're like looking at a player and you're like, you got some nice shit? Be ashamed if someone came and took it, and then try to do that.
I really haven't done that since Team Exotic, like my first group way back then, but that's also because they had a penthouse in Haywood, in, well, a not so nice part of Haywood. So, people would be popping in from time to time, but I really haven't had that come up. Just because, like, these guys really... which part of the reason I don't do this often is these guys don't really have much motivation to improve their lifestyle, improve their housing. Like, I just don't know what to think.
Would you ever consider that the deterrence factor of having you be attacked constantly at home could be a good reason to improve your lifestyle?
I mean, that's not a bad idea.
It's evil to a certain extent. I would evil air quotes, right? Like it's the dark path for a GM, but like I've done it. I've done it to my players before. One of them had their house burned down one time.
I actually had it happen today. So these guys, it's 2:00 in the morning. One of their edge runners lost a hand. Another one's high on Emerald City and just going into an absolute rage fit. So they contacted their favorite med tech of choice. And they wake up and they are growly as shit. It's like, all right, you have to pay me double though for whatever services I'm doing if you want me coming in. Like, yeah, great. They dismissed it. Then the hand comes on. And they're sitting there, all right, I need $2,000. And they all are just like, Doc, $2,000? I mean, we pay you back in the morning. It's like, no, you dragged my ass out here this morning, $2,000. And no one's lifestyle would cover such an operation.
God damn.
Oh yeah, drinks. They've walked into the Atlantis thinking that their generic pre-pack lifestyles are gonna purchase multiple drinks at an executive bar.
No.
Funny joke.
Funny joke. Yeah, no, that ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna fly. Absolutely not. Exec bar, you're spending 100 eddies a drink probably. Maybe 50, but like 50 is probably the floor if we're talking seriously there.
And like when it comes to themes, like that's one of the other themes I forgot to mention is the haves and the have-nots. That disparity is so extreme at this time. And oh gosh, who was it? I had someone Kibble Lifestyle, Cube Hotel, that whole run, just like, yeah, so I would like to just stop in at a hotel for the night. I'm like, okay, it's gonna be $100, but shouldn't that be covered in my lifestyle? No, you can afford to go see a movie once a month, and that's 20 eddies, Jim.
For real, yeah. Well, and I just looked it up in the back of the core rulebook. Executive bar drinks are 50 eddies. Yep.
Yeah, at the floor. And then if you want, real fancy dancy, adios motherfucker with all the bells and whistles on it.
Do you want
100 eddy mark?
Do you want real reposado tequila? That's gonna cost a lot.
You want a shot of this beautiful stuff from south of the border? 500 eddies, and it's all yours. I have charged someone 500 eddies a shot for also a golden for a like dark whiskey with gold flakes in it. Oh, that's
not the gold flake tax.
The gold
no.
lager.
Oh, not that gold flake tax. The gold, it makes things more valuable by simply being in them. Oh my god.
One other theme and thing that I'd like to look at is the tension. Neon Inferno's finale is a great example of this. And same for Storm Chaser's finale. Just, right when everything comes down to the wire, there's no steps back. You can't, turn around. When the nuke got stolen, like, she was, getting ready to just leave with that nuke and not come back. And Well, it was a chase down to the end of it to try to save the mission.
Right. Oh man. No, that is, I was extremely proud of both my players for like, well, especially Erica, Persephone's player. I was extremely proud of her in that moment. I told her as much afterwards. I still bring it up from time to time when we hang out, because like that took a lot of initiative on her part, and it also took like my players not getting upset with each other about the sudden last second PvP. Like they needed to trust each other and then trust that I understood what was going on and that I would be fair about it. So no, like I was extremely proud of our whole crew doing that last mission in season 1. God, that was so good. And yeah, in your Storm Chaser finale was very, very much in that same vein. Yeah,
there was Roy and Warlock trying to push one another. 5 stories down into the Totentons, and right when everyone thought, okay, we did it, he's dead, it's all over, and then it wasn't.
Vengeful God has appeared on the stage. What would you like to do?
And Roy had to make, Roy and his team had to make one last stand to prove that, yes, Roy was worthy of taking over Maelstrom from Warlock. And now to also add to the tension and whatnot, and Fiberpunk over there in Emmerron's chat in regards to mechanics and alternate rules. We're going to be talking about like what we like including here in a bit.
Yeah,
but
and if we don't address, because just to give everyone an idea, if you aren't looking at chat, because I know mine does post to the screen, but he's asking about if we cover the chase rules yet today. If we don't cover them more detailed, in the more detailed way before it, we can talk a little about that during Q&A, because unless, Diamond, you've got a bunch of questions, I don't have a ton to bring up today. So I'd be down to talk about that as part of our Q&A time if you are.
I've got I've got a couple I got to go grab, and then I'll put them up onto the Q&A.
Okay.
But I suppose in other parts of tension, which of course I'm going to pull from Neon Inferno on this one. Fucking Nyla going into the data fortress this past week. Holy shit.
That was fun.
Like Nyla, spelunking into basically the forbidden world of, the old, I wouldn't say the old net, but places where, they shouldn't still exist at this point in time.
Yep. That was so much fun to write. I have to say, like, the design and writing on that was so much fun. I really, really had a good time with like just letting my imagination go a little wild and just like figuring that one out. And I knew Nyla would be up for it. So again, that's just, I think a big part of when you're GMing something, this extends a little beyond theme, but I think it's appropriate to talk about it here, is if you're ever GMing and you're like, I've got a batshit crazy idea, but I don't know whether I should do it. My biggest recommendation is if it doesn't break any of the baseline rules, like, and this is not to call anyone out. So if you hear this, because someone that I'm about to talk about, I think does listen to the podcast. One of the people I talked to IRL about Cyberpunk one time said, oh yeah, I made this like elixir thing that swapped people's stats around. And I was like, ooh, stat math is kind of something you're supposed to kind of stick in stone. But, if it works for your table, it works for your table. That's kind of the big thing. Is like, if you do something crazy with your homebrew and it works at your table, power to you. It works at your table. I would never do that. I believe like stats should represent what they represent, right? And they should stay representing that. And I wouldn't fuck with someone's skill levels or anything. I deal with it through penalties and stuff like that. But ultimately, I think that if you have a crazy idea and it doesn't break like the foundational rules of the game in a way that would make the game not work, do it. Like, try it, see what you like about it. And if it falls flat the first time you do it or whatever, or if the players you're playing with don't agree that it's cool or fun or whatever, like you think it is, you know, then that's fine. You tried the one time, it didn't work. Okay, move on. Maybe put it in your back pocket and see what didn't they like about it. That's always kind of my big thing is if you bring something to the table, your players aren't wild about it, don't be afraid to have a conversation with them afterward. Like, what did you like and what didn't you like about it? Maybe they didn't like anything about it, but maybe what they didn't like is really important feedback for you. Because you're like, okay, cool, you didn't like this. Like, if Nyla, for some reason, hadn't liked my Data Fortress idea on Monday, and he'd said, you know, oh, I really didn't like how Black Ice interacted with me when I was in that network. I would have much preferred if it worked this way or that way. I could take that as feedback the next time I do something like that, if I do need to run like a Data Fortress again. But yeah, that's kind of what I'd recommend doing, is always be willing to iterate on your ideas. Don't be afraid of doing crazy things. It is so much more fun when you just try something. Just make sure that you're not fundamentally breaking game balance, which is why I always say read and understand the rules as written first, then iterate on them once you understand what they're doing and how they work. Because it's going to be way more satisfying and nothing's going to blow way out of the water when you do that.
All right.
But yeah, I think we've officially I think we've officially hit the end of topic 1 time. So yeah, if you have any last minute thoughts, Diamond.
I think overall, when it comes to themes and what they speak out, like the way I look at a theme is simply more just the diving board for what it leads to later down the road. So just for me, looking at like, you know, the human condition, and then suddenly it just leads to, okay, but what if you push an AI to the point that they realize what they are? What does that cause, and what kind of consequences come with it? Yeah, that's one of the recent questions I've been toying around with recently.
Sure.
That's all I got there.
All right. Well then, everyone, if you're watching this on Twitch or listening to this on Spotify, you're not going to notice anything. You're just going to, you know, hear us switch over here. If you are watching this on YouTube, however, this is the part of the episode where we switch over to Diamond's side of things. So we will be going over to her channel now. It'll be linked down below for part 2 of this week's episode, as well as our weekly Q&A. So with that said, I hope to see you all over there. As well as always, next week on Wireheads as well. So we'll see you there in just a moment.